So in this session, I want to talk to you about instructional design model that you can use to get over or nullify the competitive advantage that many formal training providers have over you at the moment. And you actually can take the advantage back, or if you're doing your own course, you don't have to change what you do. You're probably doing what you need to do anyway. Or if you're trying to change what you do to mimic them, that's not going to work for you, because the government is actually giving them a competitive advantage, which I'll explain to you in a moment there as well. So rather than blaming the government, I mean, that's what they do. The formal vet sector, training sector is actually delivering the government's IP. So they're obviously going to give them a competitive advantage over. But this is just come down to, you don't have to be an RTO to deliver quality training. So you can do this yourself. And you can go out there, and the irony is that a lot of RTOs are having to come back to industry experts and actually get them to deliver or write training content for them, because their trainers have been out of the game so long that they no longer have the industry currency that you do. And as you're updating your content every 6 months or so, you can sell the secondhand stuff to them and you can still be getting your premium clients, okay? So what's the model that I see not only RTOs, universities, schools, business consultants using? It comes down, it's called the format instructional design model. And like Simon Sinek says, it also starts with why. You've got to have meaning or purpose as to why you do something. When you know why you want to do it, or why you're going to do it, then you can work out what to do. So from there, when you know what to do, then, well, how do I do it? And when you know how to do it, then it comes into, well, that's how I do it in this situation, but then what if things change? Okay, can you adapt it? Darwin didn't say survival of the fittest, he said survival of the fittest to the environment, which is the key thing, because that means the most adaptable. So if you want to survive in business, then you need to be able to adapt what you do, which means that you need to have different options. Everyone's a good parent until there's a problem, then they need options. Same as everyone's a good manager when there's a problem, but then you need options, but you need them beforehand, okay? So this is where managers tend to focus on what to do, which is about performance. All the performance measures are about what to do. Leaders focus on the why, and it's harder to have measures on that. A lot of them are soft measures, or what they call soft skills measures of that sort of thing, which are harder to judge, and usually skills are something which is best assessed by others. Okay, so performance measures can be self-assessed by what you do, okay, but the why you do what you do is something that Tony Robbins did. That was the title of his talk on TED Talk before Simon Sinek come out with, Start With Why, which was the name of his book. But he was talking about why leaders do this, and he come out with Leaders Eat Last to expand on it, all this sort of thing there as well. Okay, so there's this is the theory that I run with. How it relates to the formal system is the why you do it is the name of the units of competency within the qualifications, okay, and also the descriptor of what that unit of competency is. The what to do is based on research by the government in regards to businesses, mostly large businesses, the 3% of businesses in Australia, or 2.5%, I think. 97% of businesses in Australia have got less than 20 staff. Out of that, 85% of that have less than 5 staff. Okay, so when you look at the training package, they've got a limited market in that it's written for mainly the large businesses. So it needs to be adapted for smaller businesses, which comes into the fact that there's very few trainers out there that are allowed to actually adapt their training package they're given it to deliver. Okay, so they're told what to do, which is generally in the performance criteria written in the unit of competency. But that's not the assessment requirements. That's just about what they have to train them in. How they do it is what's called the knowledge evidence. And that's the skills and knowledge that they need based on their experience. And that's going to determine if they can do how you want them to do it, or do you need to train them? Or are you going to recognize prior learning that their experience says that they've done this previously in another way? So even in assessment, they can get the hand in their work and they relate it to the real world business. But if it's done in a simulated business environment, skills are not automatically transferable to the real world. So just because they can do it in an assessment task doesn't mean that they can do it in the real world. And this is what the problem with a lot of RTOs have got, because you don't have to do it in a real world. You can do it in a simulated business, but that simulated business, unless it is basically a real world business that you've just pulled onto the online learning platform and you've got access to all of the same policies and procedures and that sort of stuff, it's not going to be real world. But that's sufficient to issue the qualification. So what they tend to do is once they test the skills and the knowledge evidence, then they go, well, okay, can you do it in a different situation? So they give them another situation, which is the performance evidence they need to provide, which is, what if this happens? What would you do? And if you're just doing it the same way as what you've been taught, that's what's called teaching the test. So this is where a lot of trainers and assessors might make the mistake that they go, well, this is what they do in their performance evidence, but they're supposed to come up with their way to do it. That's the way tacit knowledge works. Explicit knowledge is what is explicitly stated, and it can be codified and put into steps and procedures. So this is how you can do it. But tacit knowledge is your know-how, and the know-how that they need to get is how do they do it in a different situation. That shows that they can transfer the skills to the real world. Okay, but this is where it comes down to, if you have, this is where RTOs have come under a lot of criticism lately. And what's happening at the moment is there's basically a repositioning going on where they talk about the VET system, or vocational education and training system. There's actually 3 systems that have developed, and it's based largely on this model here. And this is also an indicator of the size of these different segments of the VET segment. Okay, so this is the 70-20-10 principle. Your 10% of learning comes from the learning event, the structured courses, workshops, webinars, that sort of thing, which is what RTOs specialize in. Then you've got coaching and mentoring, which is what L&D professionals specialize in. That's the next lot of knowledge. 20% of your knowledge is gained from there. Now, these are basically, we're talking about largely overlapping bell curves and all of this sort of stuff, statistically speaking. But an intelligent tool can complicate something. Let's just keep it simple. And just as a general guide, this is to give you an indicator or a point of reference as to where different training and that sort of thing sits into it. So coaches and mentors you've got there, but you can't be coached or mentored until you're competent, which means that they need to be trained first. Okay, so that's the importance of training. But it's just the first step. So the qualification isn't the outcome, okay, of learning. It's just the starting point, really. Then it goes into, well, they go in and they can prove that they do it in the real world by going into the community, getting coaching or mentoring from people that are doing it that aren't specialist trainers. I would recommend that you go through, some people like mentoring, they just want to be told what to do, I just need it to work. Okay, so they're suitable for a mentor, and you go and say, well, how would you do it? And they tell you. But if you don't have the skills and knowledge, and the mentor doesn't know what your capabilities are, then that's not going to work for you. There, it would be a coach. Now, a coach may not have the experience in doing it themselves, but what they do is they sit down, they talk with you. Okay, well, where do you want to get from there? And they ask you questions. So they work out, okay, well, this is the first step, this is the next step, and if you can do that, they do what's called positive contingency planning, which is, if we do this, then we can do this, and then we can do this, and then a coach will hold you accountable for it. You said you were going to do this. Sound familiar? Okay. Now, there's another type of contingency planning, which is negative contingency planning, which is to stop pain. Okay. So that's the only way to truly eliminate the risk is to not do it. So if it's too high risk for you to do it, or you're too scared to do it, and that's what the risk is, then you have what's called a negative contingency plan. Is, okay, well, if we can't do that, then what else can we do? Or we change it. So it's a little bit different to going through it, but that's where it comes into the what if. So when you're looking at this model, you go through it once, and that's how you learn one way to do it, and then you learn how to adapt it. But then when situations change, you go through the whole process again. Why do I need to change? Well, because the situation's changed and it's not working anymore. Okay, well, what can I change it to? These are your options. Okay, well, how do I do then? Then you've got to learn it. And then you go, well, what if it works, or what if it doesn't work? Okay, and that's where it comes into your contingency planning. Can be negative or positive when you go through it the second round again. All right, so how does the government give the competitive advantage to RTOs? Don't forget that they're the ones that actually register the IP. It's nationally recognised training, so it's their house, their rules. So if you want to be registered training organisation, you do so that you can issue the qualifications, which are their IP. Okay, So you have to pay for that and everything else. And there's a lot of compliance measures that go through there as well. But this is where it's a double-edged sword for them. Less than 30% of the employees of RTOs are actually trainers and assessors. So it's very high maintenance. And from a business model point of view, the people delivering the product are in the minority. So this is where it comes into that can lead to the people looking after the business interest, not looking after the customers as much, because basically they outvote the trainers and assessors that are actually doing the training 2 to 1. So this is where it comes into that even if they listen to them, management might make the decisions and that sort of stuff too. Now, not even the auditors, all the auditors working for the regulator have operational experience in RTOs, things like that, okay? So operational experience means running the RTO, which your core product is the training, okay? So how do they get the core products? Well, the government does that for them. They go out there and they talk to industry, and what's called a service skills organisation, and PwC, Skills for Australia, you know, one of the big 3 or 4 accounting firms in the world, is actually develops and does the consultation with industry to decide what you want to put into the training package, what the government should put into the training package, okay? And what they do is they write all that down and they externally get it out of people's heads, and it's like a writing down a whole bunch of recipes. A chef would write down a whole bunch of recipes in a book, okay? Then what they do is they give that to what's called an industry reference committee, who then has a look at, okay, well, is it fit for purpose? And they make an idea. Then that goes through the process where they combine it into qualifications. Okay, well, we need 12 units for a qualification, but there's 40 options of units that they can pick. Well, they need to pick this 6, all of this sort of stuff. So it's like that you're putting it into a cookbook. Instead of just having recipes, now you've got a cookbook which has got desserts, it's got entrees, it's got mains, it's got the sauces, all of this sort of stuff in the different sections of the cookbook. And that's what they do with the qualification. So that means that all an RTO has to do is internalization, which is getting it into your head. Okay, so they just have to do the training part of it. All the rest of it's done for them. But you can see what happens there is that because they're making a generic course that's for big business, it's like, well, they teach you a lot of stuff that you don't necessarily need. Now, ask the question, do you need to know how the engine works to drive a car? Okay, if you need to know how the engine works, then you want to be a mechanic, not a driver, okay? So this is where it comes down to the fact that, yes, they might be teaching them how the engine works, but if they just want to drive the car, as in they just want to do the job, then it's only if it doesn't work that they need to know how the engine works. So they can come back and do that later. But if you're teaching them things in business that work and you know that it works and you go through there as well, it comes down to you're only going to teach them what they need to do that specific job in that what-if situation. And then you're going to teach them how to do it in another situation. And then you're going to teach them how to do it in another situation. So when they're actually on the job and you integrate this learning into the workforce or into the workplace, like you're doing as a consultant, you're going in there and you're not only doing the marketing with them, you're teaching them, telling them what to do, all of this sort of stuff. They're contributing content and all this sort of thing. It basically means in the same time, you can teach them how to do it in 7 what-if situations in the same time that an RTO teaches them to do it in 1. So that's where you get the competitive advantage back, because it means that in 1 week, they can give you, you can give someone knowledge in the workplace. Basically what it would take them to do in a 7-week course or 7-week part of a course for an RTO, because they like to sell full qualifications. Okay, so this is where it comes down into the real value for you is going into teaching them what they need. Why do they need to know? Why do they need to know how the engine works to drive a car? Okay, well, to improve it. But if they can't drive a car, why are you teaching them how the engine works? If you don't like the training, you're not going to like the job. So why not see if they like the job? And the easiest way to do it is 70% of their knowledge comes from doing the job. So why not get them to try it? And this is where, I mean, Yoda was wrong. There is a try. Okay, and that's where people get the confidence to it. So how do they get the confidence? And this is where it comes to another model and talks about psychology or going into that sort of theory where it's what's their attachment strategy. This has been well researched and all this sort of stuff. You know, you might see things on the core sensitivities, which we'll talk about in a moment. That's part of the Social Security International training course, and it's about raising children and all this sort of stuff. But your attachment strategy as a default is set in childhood, and people tend to go back to it when they're triggered or they're under stress. Okay, so people that are hard to trigger or rarely go back to their childhood are people they've got a secure attachment strategy. And when you look at this model, they've got a positive model of others. They've also got a positive model of themselves. So they're not afraid to collaborate. They're not afraid to take criticism. Okay, and they're the ones that you want to work with, or that want to work with other people, and they're what's known as collaborators. Then you move on to one, you've got preoccupied people. Now, what I've found is that people that are preoccupied with building the relationship, they tend to have what's known as a separation sensitivity, which is one of the core sensitivities. They tend to have cash flow issues because they give too much away. They do too many things for free. They just want to help, but they don't really have the skills to help it. And you can look up the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is another one that we look up, but Google that and see where you're on there as well. Quite often people that are preoccupied, they might also have a codependence that says that if they can't help people, they think people are going to go away. So to try and do that, they're always coming up with suggestions, helping and all this sort of thing. But they're also the ones that you find they have cash flow issues in their business, which is a problem for a lot of issues, particularly with training people. These people are stuck on the why they do it, okay? So if you're looking at how do you overcome it, this is where Simon Sinek can come in and look at some of his videos and coaching and that sort of stuff. Find your why, so why are you doing it? And when you know your why, then you can move on to the next one, which is what to do. But people that get stuck here have a fearful psychological safety sensitivity. Okay, so it's called a fearful attachment strategy. You want to be in the Goldilocks zone. You don't want to let people get too close because that leads to pain. You know, and you're vulnerable to abuse. You don't want to push people away because living in isolation, we've all found with COVID, is also leading to pain. And you also don't get to collaborate with people if you push them away. So it's a fine line or a knife edge that they're walking along to try and get to their secure attachment strategy. And that's very difficult for people to do. Who can help you get over that? Well, start watching a few of Gary Vee's videos and all this sort of stuff. And he'll say, you know, if you want to learn how to sell, just start selling. And they say, well, what should I sell? Well, what do you like? What do you love doing? Start selling that. That's the easiest thing for you to sell. And that's how he gives them the confidence to go over it, where they skip over they don't need the training because they've already got it. So he's actually recognizing what their strengths are. And you ask people, well, what would you rather double, $50 or $10? And they go, oh, $50. Well, if you love this, you're going to have a strength in it. When you're talking to other people that are passionate about it, you're going to have something in common with them. And people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So if they think, oh, we've got something in common, they're going to care about them. So they're going to take your recommendations for the products to buy. Okay. And that's one way you can get over a fearful attachment strategy there as well. But it's related to confidence, and that's how, you know, Gary Vee I found is good for people that are seen with a fearful attachment, getting them into the secure zone where they can start collaborating with people. And then you've got the dismissive one. Now, the dismissive attachment strategy tends to lead to poor products. Okay, so it's not that they don't get negative feedback, they just don't see it as relevant to them. I know what I'm doing, you know, I'm an expert in this. I've been doing this for years. I know what my customers want. But what they do is they know what they want and what they use it for, but then you're not in the business of what you do, you're in the business of marketing what you do. So they need to promote that to other people, what their intentions are, what they think. And then they need to go in and find people, which you can do on social media these days. You can always find someone that's in your market. Now, traditionally, this would be the role of a PR expert would do this for you. But these days, a lot of people try and do it themselves. So where it comes into it is that in an extreme inflexible form, it's known as narcissistic personality disorder, okay? But narcissism is reversible, but not for a narcissist. There's only a small percentage of the population that are actually narcissists. But what it does is it usually triggers when people act like a narcissist. You know, what does a narcissist do? Well, it's basically the same job description of a manager, but it's more like a micromanager, okay? So they're not just telling you what to do, they're telling you how to do it. And this is where I find Tony Robbins is a good one for getting you over this. Okay, you release the power within. It feeds on your ego. It says, you know, they've got an esteem sensitivity. So it says, no, there's nothing wrong with what you're saying. You just can't communicate with it. And this is the thing with a lot of experts, is they lose their ability to communicate with people outside of their specialist field. Okay, but people in their specialist field don't need training from them. So what they try and do is they try and go and tell them to change what they do, and they already know, well, this is, I know that this works for me. I don't want to do it that way. So then they go back to people that have got no idea what they do, and they go through the process and they over-explain it and everything else, and they teach them how the engine works so that they can drive a car. But they don't want to be mechanics, they just want to drive a car. So this is where the dismissive people get in there. They go, well, you know, this is just what I do, and you're just trying to change what I do and all this sort of stuff, you know. So they're self-reliant, they're independent, but not accepting help from people is not independence, that's codependence. Okay, so there's a whole book on that subject, but it's not showing your independence if you're knocking at that. If you're going through the help there as well. In the same way that if you try to help people and they don't say thank you, people will say, oh, look, I went out of my way to help this person and they didn't even say thank you. Well, first of all, if you don't go out of your way to help people, you can help more people. So why are you going out of the way? Let someone else help them. Okay, now if you do feel the need to help them and they don't say thank you, then you haven't helped them. Ask them, say, did I help you? And they say yes, and say, well, how did I help you? And see what they say. If they can't tell you how you helped, then you didn't actually help them. So people need to be honest with you, and this is where it's very confronting to get to. So you need to be in the secure zone before you can do all this sort of stuff like that. And that's where I find that people like Gary Vee, Tony Robbins, and Simon Sinek seem to be the best ones when you identify the triggers. But unless you think it's a problem, you're not going to do anything about it, which is the first problem. Okay, so if you go here and there's a problem, you go here and there's a problem, you go here and there's a problem. What's the problem? The one common thing is you. Okay, so you need to accept it. But if you don't see yourself as being the problem, then you're not going to be secure enough to actually fix the problem or come up with solutions. Okay, so this is where it says, you know, a lot of people will say, well, you know, the government, they're looking for the government to save them at this time. They're looking for this and that sort of thing. My advice to you is, well, know what you do, know what you love. If you do what you love and love what you do, that's two different things. You're going to find that you'll learn quicker and all this sort of stuff, and you'll be able to maintain a competitive advantage just by trying to better yourself, not by trying to be better than other people. Okay, that's where it comes down to. If you're told this is what you need to do, then that's your worst option. Okay. If you go, okay, well, this is what you can do and this is how you can make money. If you're doing it for the money and that's your why, then you're only going to pick the okay option. If you pick something and you do what you love, you're going to know, because if you're not getting paid for it, you'd still do it. So what do you love doing outside of work? And how can you make money out of that? That's the thing that you need to work out. Now, this is where it comes into that, you know, I've got a passion for this, but I need to support my family and everything else. There's always going to be someone out there that can help you do it. And if you go to them with a secure attachment, even a narcissist is going to want to help you because they want to be rewarded for their specialness. That's their unspoken desire. So get them to go out and tell them what you do. But if they start saying to them, well, this is what you need to do and just do this and forget about all that, just do this, they're just telling you what they would do. Okay, so if you don't have the experience and you don't want to be like them, this is where they're not the person for you. Okay, so this is where a lot of people are saying, well, okay, well, this is what I need to do if I want to have a successful training business, because this is what the RTOs do. Well, no, you don't need to do that. But there's also examples of people that don't need to do it, that are doing what they love and they got into it. But these people love what they do and they don't necessarily love training. They sort of fell into it because there were so many people out there willing to pay them to train them. And that's how they can now do what they love and love what they do. And this is where you see them, they might only work 2 or 3 days a week. That's just what they get paid for. But what do they do for the rest of the time? They're not sitting on a beach doing nothing. They're spending time with their family and all this sort of stuff. So that's their why. Money is never your why. What you do with it is your why. So if you're doing a training business because, you know, my why is because I want to help people, okay, well, yes, that's fine. You can do that you can do that anytime. But what you help people with, you need to be careful in regards to the fact that, are you helping them? And if you're not helping them, are you actually abusing them? Or enabling the abuse from others, because they're going to go to someone who will abuse them there as well. Okay, if you've got any questions, put it in the comments below. Feel free to like the page and get some comments on that, to the Facebook page, and when you see the videos come up. If you've got any questions, send it through. Feel free to message me. Happy to talk to you, all this sort of stuff as well. And we'll go through and look on the YouTube channel. We've put up a playlist for all the Omnichannel marketing videos. We've got 11 different tasks that we're looking at going through. This is just about, I'm already getting questions from training organizations and people that are looking at starting training courses. So I'm doing this for them, but we'll have a whole one on what to do for ebooks, you know, what to give away as your what, how to do it as your membership site, and the what if is your custom clients, which are your high value clients that you're going to do one-on-one coaching and mentoring with. Okay. All right. So hopefully you get something out of that, and we'll talk to you soon.